A very warm welcome to the 5th World Bank Africa Investor Strategic Dialogue with Bankers and Investors. Today's session builds on the momentum that's been pioneered by both Africa Investor and the Bank to establish and grow a platform for public-private sector dialogue on issues and opportunities that facilitate actions and solutions to mobilizing capital and investment across the continent as an integral part of the World Bank annual and spring meetings. As many of you know, Africa Investor as an institution has dedicated itself to promoting and intermediating capital to African investment opportunities through our growing domestic and global investment partnerships and communication assets. Earlier today, we consulted with African business leaders and development finance leaders on the status and prospects for private sector development and partnership opportunities. And of course, we also highlighted some of the challenges and put our minds together about how to address them. The issues that we were tasked to advance and champion following the 4th strategic dialogue in April at the spring meetings were sixfold. The first was, how can the platform advance the issue of scaling up resources, in particular for project development and project developers working in Africa. The second key area was to engage and mobilize resources, taking advantage of the IDA round and negotiations, focusing some of those resources on private sector-led project development companies as a new model, particularly on the venture capital basis where these types of resources could potentially absorb some of the large technical costs such as pre-feasibility studies, feasibility studies. The third track was looking at sovereign and pension funds, and we were really tasked there to identify models to address the risk appetites of African and international pension funds and sovereign wealth funds to participate in African infrastructure investments at both ends, at the early stage end in terms of project preparation, and also to stimulate and importantly to pilot a series of secondary market infrastructure investment platforms. The fourth key area was access to talent in the context of being able to look at skills mapping, planning and development linked to the life cycle of infrastructure assets, and how the bank could potentially work with other partners in government to champion the fact that we always hear about an infrastructure deficit and an infrastructure backlog. How can we translate that into a job creation opportunity through an education system, through training and putting the right skills in place to take some of those aspects forward in partnership with business, civil society and the academia. The fifth area was leadership on PPI, on private sector participation in infrastructure. In other words, increasing the participation of the African private sector, which leads in less than 1 in 10 infrastructure projects, which essentially makes it the lowest level of PPI in the world. Unsolicited bids was the sort of key final area, and the need to review and create an alternate, transparent procurement framework that harnesses private sector resources to take on and champion key projects that other institutions have no specific interest to do or the resources to pursue. Ladies and gentlemen, structured around these themes of this strategic dialogue, our goal today is really to advance these critical issues which are focused on intra-African investment, mobilizing domestic and pension fund capital, infrastructure investment, and innovative platforms to engage early-stage investment capital for project developer teams working in Africa. And we make the distinction there between project preparation facilities and project developers. We are really keen to support the companies on the ground because we know that they are going to be the owners and the drivers of future key projects, notwithstanding the fact that we all have access to the resources to invest. But the recurring issue in question always is, where is the pipeline of bankable projects? So we think the bank is very well placed to provide leadership and sort of champion those areas. As I say, I think the resources are there and the resources are growing, and the research is making clear that domestic institutional capital on the continent is set to increase significantly. Africa's 6 largest pension funds by asset size will nearly triple to 622 billion by 2020 from a 260 billion in 2010. And the grand projection is by 2050, this could balloon to over $7 trillion US dollars, an important source of development capital, I'm sure everyone will agree. Now, research clearly affirms that intra-African trade is a serious issue, particularly from a private sector development standpoint. And depending on whose research you rely on, anywhere between 12 to 15%. But intra-African investment is sitting at a very low 5% with a projected annual compound growth rate of 25 to 30% per annum over the next 10 years. By contrast, intra-European investment in 2010 was sitting at 82%. So we believe that with the right level of focus and prioritization, we should be targeting over the next 10 years within the continent up to and around 60% intra-African investment flows to support the continent's growth. Maktar, to achieve this, we're really calling on your continued leadership from the World Bank's Africa region team to prioritize and pursue this area and this issue of intra-African investment growth. There's no doubt that the consequences of an initiative of this nature will go a long way towards raising the continent's investment profile, where domestic capital will act as a catalyst to attract and retain global capital, and we think that's an important new dynamic. So, ladies and gentlemen, in this fifth strategic dialogue, we will hear from ministers, bankers, investors on their requirements and focus to develop and support the private sector working in Africa, and their activities more specifically in the area of PPPs. Maktar, personally, and I'm sure collectively, we applaud your commitment to engage the private sector and the investment community working in Africa in support of the continent's economic transformation, and we look forward to this dialogue platform continuing to contribute positively to focus the agenda across the bank and the private sector operating on Africa.
Doing business in Africa, you can't afford to be without Africa Investor.